this is the reality of it. I worry about your commitment to fighting, and I worry about where you stand. Not your commitment to training. Not your commitment to training, not your commitment to give it your all. I think you have one foot out the door. I think you're looking. You disagree? Mm-hmm. I think you're looking at where the future is going to take you, and that you can't do this forever. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be in fighting. And I've seen it with a lot of guys. They early in their career, they're invulnerable. They're beasts. They're monsters. They're 100% focused. Fighting becomes their life. It becomes their everything. And then somewhere along the line, they start thinking, how long can I do this? When's the out time? What's my exit strategy?
You don't think that's what the educated fighters are thinking?
Yes, that is what the educated fighters are thinking. But that's a part of the issue with fighting. There's people in fighting that do really well in the beginning because they're dumb. And this is what I mean by that. Really intelligent guys have to process a lot of variables. You have to process more variables than a guy who doesn't think about the future. Those reckless, crazy guys that happen to be athletically gifted, they just can put all that shit aside and go out there and perform. And as long as they get the right opponents and as long as they have the right results, that feeds that invulnerability, and they can do fine. You're a smart dude. And the problem with smart dudes is smart dudes think about variables. You have to think about the future. You also think about brain damage. You think about concussions. You think about how many you've already had, how many you got coming up, how much damage you're taking in training. When does damage start to show up in your life? Like when does it show up? And how much can you mitigate? And how far is it when you're too far? We all know fighters that are fucking gone. I mean, we all do. We've all either we know them from television or we know them from real life. But, every time you see Muhammad Ali or you see Joe Frazier or you see Terry Norris. Terry Norris is one of the saddest ones out there, man.
There are also guys.
Name an old school fighter.
Also UFC veterans.
Name an old school fighter you've seen. You're like, God, that guy's sharp.
Exactly.
Said no one ever.
None. Said no one ever. But you are, you're a sharp dude. And so I know that if you keep going, that's coming. There's no way around that, True. And the reality of your skill set and where you at now, I don't see you beating the elite guys. I don't see you beating Cain Velasquez. I don't see you beating Junior Dos Santos. I don't see you beating Fabricio Verdum. You came into fighting fairly late in life. You're a good athlete. You're a strong guy. You're a big guy. And you can do a lot of things because of that. And you're very dedicated, and you're very disciplined, and you get shit done. But there's a reality of fluidity of movement, of mechanical efficiency of movement that happens when you get a guy who's trained his whole life at a certain aspect of MMA, whether it's wrestling, whether it's kickboxing, whether it's jiu-jitsu. There's a fluidity to their movement that you don't really have. And it's not that you don't try hard. It's not that you're not dedicated. It's not that you're not disciplined. It's not that you're not intelligent. There's shit that other people can do that you can't do.
I don't know if I agree with you.
Don't you consider yourself a fairly decent striker, right? You consider yourself a fairly decent striker?
Yeah.
Right? How good do you think, like your punches are in comparison to like an elite high-level kickboxer, like a Joe Schilling or a Melvin Manhoof or someone who has real fluidity and mechanical efficiency to the way they move and punch and kick?
I think that's one argument. I think the same argument is being able to throw a punch to a takedown. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. No, I do that. Those two guys you mentioned, I do it better. Nowhere. I mean, they're not even close on the same.
Well,
level.
Schilling is really, he's a kickboxer essentially.
But they fight MMA.
He just fought recently for the first time in I think it was 5 or 6 years. But I mean, he fought Melvin, which is another guy who's not going to take you down ever. It's a stand-up fight. But there are guys, like Georges St. Pierre, who's efficient standing up, and then also, good at making those transitions. You it's not like you don't have good qualities, but if you had a wrestling match with Cain Velasquez, how well do you think you'd do?
Straight up wrestling?
Yeah.
I think people would be surprised.
Really? You think so?
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd be surprised. I really do. I think he'd fuck you up. And I say that as a friend and a guy who loves you. I think he's just on another level. It's just different. It's a different kind of athlete.
You said that, Brennan. I mean, you've said that you'd probably end up on your back with Cain. I mean,
yeah, I mean that's not the fight there either.
Right.
If it's a jiu-jitsu match, it's a different thing too.
Yeah. Well, if it's just a straight jiu-jitsu match, yeah, it's very different. But in MMA, obviously, he can punch you in the face when he's got you on the ground. I just think there's a certain amount there's a bridge between you and the very best guys in the world. And I don't know if you can cross that bridge. That's the reality of life. You know, like what if you look at your fight with Andrei Arlovsky, if you look at your fight with Travis Brown, if you look at your performances in the octagon, not what you think you're capable of, not what you know you're capable of at your best, but if you have to judge it just by your performances inside the octagon, you know, you can go all the way back to your fight with Roy Nelson. You can go to your fight with Nogueira. You can go to your fight with Ben Rothwell.
Crow Cop.
Well, you knocked out Crow Cop, but the reality of Crow Cop is I'm a huge Crow Cop fan. Crow Cop has taken way too much fucking damage.
For sure.
Way
Then what about the
too much
Gonzaga
damage.
fight?
Well, you beat Gonzaga. It was a good fight. Yeah, it was a good fight. Look, you've had good fights. You know, the Chris Tucker fight was very impressive.
Nah.
Like, look, you're a very good fighter. That's not what the issue is. The issue is, can you become a champion? If you can't become a champion, are you comfortable with getting knocked out 3 or 4 more times over the next 5 or 6 years? You know, and that is a possibility. It's a possibility. It might not happen. You might be okay, but it also might happen. It might happen 2 fights in a row. It might happen, you know, I mean, if you have to have a rematch look, if Travis Brown loses his next fight and you win your next fight and you have a rematch with Travis Brown by some strange unforeseen circumstance, it's a fucking tough fight for you again, you know, and it very well could happen the same way again. You know,
Or
he's
it could
more
happen
fluid.
the other way, for sure.
It could, but he's more fluid on his feet. He's more lethal. Like his ability to close the distance and land shots, he has an extra speed, an extra ability to connect that I don't see from you. This is hard for me to say because I love you as a friend. You know, it's hard for me to say, but this is just a reality to the efficiency of his movements, the way he lands shots, and the way you do it. Could you land a haymaker on him and take him out? Yeah, it's totally. Yes, you could do it. You're a big guy, man. You hit hard. You know, if you land the right shot at the right time. But if I was objective and I was standing outside looking at it from the outside and I had a bet, I would have to bet on him. This sucks for you. It's hard to hear.
That's maybe the worst show I've ever done.
It's hard to hear, but
I don't necessarily, and you know me, you're my boy. I don't agree with everything you're saying either.
Okay.
The other thing is, too, you don't think, I mean, when I fought Arlovsky, I fought 1 round in almost a year. So I'm just not, you know, it's about getting comfortable in there. At
That's
the same
true,
time.
but look at Dominic Cruz's return bout against Mitsugaki. He hadn't fought in 3 years. Came in like a fucking bat out of hell. Looked like a goddamn world beater. Came in
for
and
sure,
just
and that's great for
took
the
it to
guys
him
that
and smashed him.
135, and that's the exception as well.
Johnny Hendricks hadn't fought in 13 months when he fought Robbie Lawler this past weekend. It was a fucking incredible fight, you know, down to the wire. But I mean, some people thought that Hendricks won. Some people thought Lawler won.
I didn't
But what
see it.
you didn't see from him is you didn't see a guy who looked like he couldn't make the connections. A guy who didn't look fluid in there. The Arlovsky fight looked like you couldn't pull the trigger. Look, you were telegraphing the right hand. It was like your attacks were real obvious. Like it was real obvious what you were attempting to do, as opposed to a guy like, you know, I hate to use George again, but George St. Pierre is one of the best, in my opinion, ever at disguising what he's going to do. You don't know if he's going to kickbox with you, if he's going to try to take you down. You don't know if he's going to try to jab you or hit you with a lead right. I mean, he throws all kinds of and it's part of the beauty of what he does. He's incredibly unpredictable. And you were the opposite of that. You were being very predictable. And Arlovsky was stiff as hell. He was so nervous, and you couldn't close the deal on him. You couldn't get in on him. You couldn't land shots. I thought you should have won that fight, but I thought it was a terrible fight, you know. And I think that Arlovsky, especially in that fight, was as ripe as he's ever going to get. You know, he was more comfortable in the Bigfoot Silva fight, and, you know, obviously this is Bigfoot Silva, who's now off testosterone. There's a lot of issues there. I mean, Arlovsky tagged him and he was out. Who knows how much of a factor that plays? There's a lot of factors in there. But if I'm a guy who's a talent scout and I'm looking at potential world beaters and I'm looking at guys who can fight at the elite level or guys who can fight for a world title, based on those performances, I would not say that you're there. I don't like saying this, man. I would rather say, hey, man, better luck next time. Hey, I love you. I'm winning your corner no matter what. And that is a true thing. But as an analyst, as someone who's watched in a professional way, I don't know how many fights I've called. I've called way over 1,000 fights. I don't know how many I've called.
2,000.
I've seen a lot of shit. I know what I'm looking at. I know what I'm seeing as far as like movement, and I know what I'm seeing. I mean, even with my old ass body, I know what I can do physically still at 47 years old, and I watch guys that can't do those things, and I'm like, that guy should not be fighting at an elite level. You just shouldn't be fighting at an elite level if you move a certain way, if you have a certain hitch to your step, if you're making mistakes like lunging forward with punches, you're leaving your chin exposed, you're loading up on the right hand over and over again. You're not recognizing that you're not hiding it enough. You're not recognizing that you're not being diverse enough in your attack. There's a lot of areas in there that if you look at, pick the most elite fighters in the world. And yeah, you could say they're lighter weight guys, like as far as technique. Pick a guy pound for pound best, okay? Any of them. Name anyone. You can make the argument that what they're doing at a very high level is they're putting everything together correctly. You watch like John Jones is a perfect example. He's not a little guy. He's 205 pounds, but he's throwing fucking head kicks and stepping in with elbows and side kicks to the body and shoots takedowns and fucking hitting
Flying
lateral
guard.
drops and throwing guys on their head. That's an elite world-class fighter. He's completely unpredictable, completely creative in there. And that's not what you're doing. You're not fighting at that level. And he is even going to get damaged. Everyone's going to get damaged. Everyone's going to get hit. You're fighting guys like Anthony Rumble Johnson and Alexander Gustafsson, and you're going to get fucking hit, man. There's no getting around that. I worry more about you than I do about them because I think that you leave more openings. You have more vulnerabilities.
My feeling is, just to jump in, is that whether or not you agree with that, what I care about is the fact that you have a future in other things and you're really good at. Like, you're really funny. And when you got Joe Rogan and I talking about how funny you are, we've had conversations about how incredibly funny you are and how how smart and funny, and we genuinely like hanging out with you. You're a 30-year-old fighter, and you got two guys 47 years old who love hanging out with you because you add to the conversation. You're smart, you're funny, you're a really good business dude. So from a selfish point of view on my side, because I love you, I can't speak to the fighting. I just want to make sure my boy's healthy at 40 and a millionaire or whatever he is, or just happy doing something else and has made that transition, because the transition's coming. Whether it's tomorrow or 5 years or 10 years, the transition must be negotiated into your next life. The great news is you have a lot of options. You just do, man.
Look, 20 years from now, you can't be fighting. It's impossible.
10 years.
Okay, but let's say 20.
Yeah.
No one's fighting at 50.
No.
If you are, my God. There's Bernard Hopkins, and then there's the rest of the world. And he's a boxer. It's a different thing. You take less wear and tear in training. Very few boxers pull out of matches because of injury. A lot of MMA fighters do. You were talking about hurting your neck in training. Like, that is just standard. Hurting your knees, wrestling, getting taken down. There's just so many variables. Kicking, there's so many variables involved in MMA training where guys get hurt.
You said something I never thought about, and I didn't know, was getting yourself in the kind of shape you have to be into for an MMA fight in the UFC. You can only keep your body at that peak performance for like 2 weeks before things start to pop. Whatever.
You could do it depending on your genetics, depending on your age, depending on the skill level or the fitness level you bring when you go into camp. The guys that go into camp without good fitness level have a harder time because a lot of the early camp is about getting into shape and building up. The guys who, like Brendan's a disciplined guy, and he can go into camp in a better physical condition than some guys because of that. You treat it like you're a real pro athlete. You're not partying or getting your body fucked up and getting lazy and fat. But even so, you can only keep up high level training for so long, you know, your body will break down. There's just no way around it. It's not a natural state to be in. To be in the state where you can fight 15 hard minutes with an elite fighter, punching, kicking, wrestling. It's like sprinting uphill or carrying someone on your back. That's what it's like. And you can't do that forever. You can't do that forever. Joints go, things
How about
blow.
25 minutes? That Lawler,
You're
fight
redlining.
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's a red line on attack. It's to let you know, listen, bitch, you can't stay here.
Yeah.
You can't stay here. You know, you can get there, but you can't stay there. You can't.
Something's gonna pop.
Bang, 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 bang. Boom! Smoke's coming out of your fucking hood, and your car's dead.
Right.
That's your knees. That's your back. That's your brain. I mean, your brain's the big one, because the brain you can't fix. You break your hand, they can put pins in it, they can put it in a cast. Yeah, it sucks. You got to jerk off with your left hand, but eventually it'll get better. Your brain doesn't get better, and that's what I worry about you more than anything. You have a strong ego. There's no way around that. You have to have a strong ego to be an elite fighter. You have to have a strong ego to be a top-level athlete. You have to. That strong ego can also fuck you, because your strong ego doesn't allow you to look at yourself the way other people look at you. You look at yourself because you know what you're capable of doing at your very best. You're not looking at yourself in terms of what you're performing at, like what's happening when you're inside the octagon, and then looking at yourself in terms of comparing yourself to the other guys in the division, the Fabricio Verdums, the Junior Dos Santoses, the Cain Velasquez, the guys who are at the top of the fucking mountain. They're performing at a different level than you. So it sucks, right? It sucks for me to say it. If I don't like it coming out of my mouth. I don't like it. And the reason why I don't like it is because I love you as a human being. But if 20 years from now you can't fight, like, when can you stop? Can you stop in 10 years? Can you stop in 5 years? Can you stop in 2 years? Can you stop? It's coming. The end is coming. It's the reality of being a fucking demolition derby car. I mean, that's what you are when you're an MMA fighter.
You're not going out like this. You don't want to go out like this. I mean, we were talking about that. And that's understandable. And I think what's interesting is, to back up what you were saying, part of what gets you where you've gotten is that drive and that self-knowledge that you can always do better. And then when suddenly somebody says stop because your brain, it's just a brain thing. It's like, well, yeah, but I got 2 more fights in me. I got 3 more fights in me. What if I win my next 3? It's almost like a gambler's.
There's always that.
Yeah, it's almost like a gambler's mentality. I think you have to have a little of that to be a fighter, I would imagine.
What I'm saying, I say with love, 100%. I'm not saying this because I want to hurt your feelings. This is the last thing I want to do. If I didn't love you, I'd walk out. I wouldn't be willing to do this, and I wouldn't want to do this. I would be like, hey, look, there's a lot of guys that if I was friends with, I'd pull them aside and I'd tell them, you got to get out, man. You got to get out. And I'd take them somewhere, take them on a fucking, a hike or something, sit them down in nature and go, look, you're involved in something that is all encompassing. It becomes your life, but it is not your life. Your life is your life. I understand this from a very minor place. It was very hard for me to stop fighting, but I stopped fighting when I was 21. And one of the reasons why I stopped fighting when I was 21 is I was starting to get headaches, man. I was starting to get headaches, and I know that I did some damage to my head. I know I did. I did a lot of sparring, and I did a lot of sparring when I transitioned from Taekwondo to kickboxing with guys who were way better boxers than me. And I got my fucking bell rang a lot. And I don't know what it did to me. And I knew back then, when I was 21, I was like, I can't keep doing this. This is going to end bad. I would be lying in bed, and I'd have headaches, and I'd say to myself, there's going to come a time where it's too late, where I wish I stopped, but it's too late. And I don't want that to be the case. I still think to this day, there's some impulsiveness to my behavior. I have this quick trigger that I really think it's probably now that I know more about chronic brain damage, chronic encephalepsy, or whatever they call it, I think I got some damage. I'm almost positive. There's something in there that I have to control in a certain way. It's not affecting my speech. It doesn't affect my ability to think about things, but there's something going on there. I know there is. There's things that get me upset, and it's like this trigger that goes off. That's directly related in a lot of guys to concussions. It's directly related, that snapping. Like when that dude knocked out his girlfriend in the elevator, was it Ray Rice?
Ray Rice, yeah.
Yeah, Ray Rice.
You can't tell me some of that doesn't have to do with the fact that guy's been hit in the head a bunch of times.
A bunch of times.
Your brain gets programmed for violence. Your brain gets programmed for violence by constantly dealing with trauma. Constantly, boom, boom, and your brain is like, you want to fire back. So when shit happens, you have this like instinctive instinct to fire back that people that don't have trauma and then haven't been busted up before don't have. And that, that's going to get worse.
Do you think you take a lot of head trauma when you train?
Not too much.
Not too
With
much.
my style, I really don't.
Too much there's no such thing. I want you to sit down with my friend Mark Gordon, who's an expert in traumatic brain injury. His name's Dr. Mark Gordon. He runs this clinic where he works with a lot of soldiers, a lot of football players. He's worked with a lot of pro athletes, and he deals with a lot of people that have PTSD and a lot of people that have chronic brain injuries. And, when he talks about it, man, he's changed my whole opinion on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Really?
I mean,
as
I'm
far
saying
as
not
brain
too much
damage.
as compared with a guy like Wanderlei Silva or George
Right.
St. Pierre,
Right.
anyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Any of the
Yeah.
major camps I've ever been to. Compared to them, no.
Yeah.
Right. But those guys, look, I love George. George is a beautiful human being. George St. Pierre has been hit 800 times in the head in his UFC career.
Actually, and I think that was in the last 4 fights. I think from
A
what I
lot
read.
of them were the
Yeah.
last 4 fights. He was hit more in the head over the last 4 fights than his entire career up until that
Okay.
point. That's what it was.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fucking damage, man. There's no getting away from that. And there's connective tissue that connects your brain to your skull that never heals. It tears and then it's gone. So this moose head, man, when I was butchering this moose, there's this part of the moose, when you take the quarters off, when you take the arms off, you cut, you skin it, right? And then there's like this tissue that you cut.
Yeah, fascia.
That's between, it's like this
It's
really...
a white stuff, right?
It's like cotton candy.
Yeah.
And as we're cutting it, the guy was explaining to me, that's the stuff that's inside your head that you damage when you have brain damage. Like that's the stuff
That's
that
what holds your
tears.
brain in
Exactly.
place, right?
And so while I'm cutting this cotton candy stuff that connects this moose's shoulder to its body, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like this stuff doesn't grow back. Like this is what holds your brain in place. That's why when you see a guy like Chuck Liddell gets hit like by Rich Franklin in that fight, a punch that he would have eaten like a candy bar earlier in his career. He gets hit and his brain sloshes around inside of his head and he goes out. You're not there yet.
Nowhere near.
You're nowhere near that. But when you see a guy like Chuck and you see the end of his career, you see him getting laid out with one shot versus Rashad Evans.
Wanderlei Silva, same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Well, look, it happens to everybody. Everybody eventually reaches that point where they can't take a shot anymore. And what that means is that you've experienced so much brain damage. There's 2 things going on. One, your brain is shutting off before it experiences more damage because it realizes that you're tough and that if it doesn't shut off, this is going to keep coming. So your brain just closes down all but the core functions and just shuts off your consciousness. There's that. And then, there's also the fact that your body has just been beaten to shit and it just can't take the amount of punishment that it used to take. It's not the same. I make the correlation or the connection to a knee injury. If you know a guy who's had a bunch of knee surgeries and his cartilage is all chewed up in there and his knee's all fucked up, that guy might look normal when he's running around, but he could hurt his knee way easier than a guy who doesn't have a fucked up knee. It just takes one thing. One guy tackles him, he's like, ah! Right. Why is it? It's because it's all damaged. Inside, it's all fucked up.
Properly, yeah.
It's the same with the brain. The human brain is exactly the same thing. And, your career is predicated on your brain being functional and healthy in order to move your body. I mean, it's a huge part of your career. Your brain has to be able to move your body and to get it to execute what you wanted to do in a fight under extreme stress in incredibly tense situations. In any time where you zig when you should have zagged, you can get hit with a bomb and you're going to get more brain damage. And every time it's more brain damage. And there's only a certain amount you can do. There's only a certain amount you can take. And it's like, what is that number? You know, if I was, look, Chuck Liddell, when he wanted to come back against Rich Franklin, most people thought it was a bad idea. Most people thought it was going to end the way it ended with Rich Franklin. But because he's a warrior and because he's a great fighter and a great champion, one of the best of all time, even a guy like Dana White has to let him do it. You got to let him do it. You got to let him go out on a shield. And then when he went out, he stopped. He's like, stop, no more. It's over. Chuck wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
He wanted to try it again.
Sakuraba, I think, is still fighting MMA. Or was.
I don't think he is anymore. He's just doing grappling competitions now.
He took terrible punishment. He was so great. Yeah.
Horrific.
And you're not, this is not.
Nowhere near these fucking guys.
Nowhere near. Nowhere near. But you could get there, and you're on that road. And there's only one way to stop that. You stop walking down that road. There's only one way. You're not gonna. It's not gonna magically heal itself. It's not. It's just there's certain realities of the physical body, and one of the starkest, scariest realities is the brain. The brain getting injured. Brains you can't fucking fix, man. If you could fix your brain the way you could fix a joint or the way you could fix a bone, I'd be like, you got knocked out, take 6 months off, you'll be back again. But you're not. The reality of brain damage is unlike any other part of the human body in that it doesn't really heal. I mean, it kind of heals. It gets all right. The nerves create new pathways and kind of make up for the fact that it's all damaged inside there now and all fucked up. But it doesn't heal the way like
muscles do and
bones do, muscles do. Like you could fix a joint. You could tear your ACL and they put in a cadaver and you do your 6 months of rehab and you're running hills again. Look, I have my right knee, my ACL is reconstructed. It doesn't bother me at all. It's actually stronger than it was before the injury because the ACL, when they replace it with a cadaver Achilles tendon, which is something like 1.5 times stronger than a regular ACL.
Crazy, yeah.
So you're fine. Like medical science is amazing. I mean, they could do shit to you where back in the day, my friend Steve Graham, he was on the U.S. ski team and he fucked his knees up bad, dude. And it was back in the day where they would open up the back of your leg and take your hamstring out and they would take the piece of your hamstring and use that to try to repair your ACL, but it always broke. It would snap off. He's had, I believe, I'm not bullshitting, I think my friend Steve has had 18 knee surgeries.
Oh, fuck.
Now the inside of his knee is covered with metal. He had it resurfaced, so he doesn't have any cartilage anymore. So he has artificial meniscus, like this meniscus thing in between these two pieces of metal that are covering the top of his knee. Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah, we were talking to Tim Ferriss. They're printing out tissue now. They're printing it out.
Yeah.
So,
they can do some amazing things to everything but the brain. The brain is the motherfucker, man. That shit doesn't heal. It just, even if it does heal, it never gets back to where it was, and the diminished capacity is unavoidable. It's unavoidable. I mean, they can help you a little bit. They can give you, there's certain therapies they can do to help you, get back some of your function, some of your control, but when you start seeing a guy like Terry Noyes, when you see those old guys, this day I go into the boxing is what I do. That fucking guy didn't always used to talk like that, man. And it creeps up on you slow. And if that happened to you, it would be a fucking terrible tragedy. Especially because you have the ability to do other shit. You're a funny dude. And now you have to fight. You're going to have to fight this not wanting to go out like that instinct. Because I lost my last fight by TKO. I got a drop of the left hook, and then I got finished off. And I remember thinking, man, I cannot not fight again. I have to at least win my last fight. I can't go out like getting knocked out. But you have to. It is what it is. If you keep going, it's not good. It doesn't get better. It's like, we're not talking about a guy, who was like Cain Velasquez when he fought Junior Dos Santos and he got stopped. We hadn't seen that from Cain before. He was already, world champion. He was at, it's like he needed time off to come back. Manny Pacquiao when he fought
Marquez.
Yeah, Manuel Marquez.
Yeah.
And even then, Freddie Roach made him take a full year off. Yeah. No sparring at all, nothing for 6-7 months.
Right.
Nothing. Just
Anyway, you got it. We'll just
thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Listen,
not
I'm
saying-
sorry. I mean, you say that like you're joking around, but you
No, I'm not joking.
yeah.
No,
It's
I'm not. I think the point has been made, and this is your life. You're going to make your choices. You're a smart guy. You know what you're doing. You know what you're capable of, and it's your life.
nobody
It's your
rides for free,
decision.
man.
It's your decision.
You don't ride for free. Nobody rides for free. And not in the world of fighting.